Blacks in technology.
Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology. Blacks in technology.
Welcome, everybody, to the 67th episode of the Blacks in Technology Big Tech Talk podcast. I am your host, hostess with the mostest. I shouldn't have said hostess with the mostest. That's kind of cheesy. Everybody says hostess with the mostest. Anyhow, I'm your host, Greg Greenlee. I do have a co-host for tonight. He's not on the call as of yet. Sean Jackson. He'll be joining us pretty soon. If this is your first time listening to this podcast, you can check Blacks in Technology out at www.blacksintechnology.net. You can also check us out on the Twitters. We are at Black in Technology, and that's BLKTECHNOLOGY. We are also on LinkedIn. We have a LinkedIn group under Blacks in Technology. We're on Facebook as well, so that's facebook.com/Blacks in Technology. And if you are listening in, of course, if you're checking out this podcast, you have to be listening, right? But if you are on Twitter right now and you have questions for our guests, tweet them using the hashtag BitTechTalk. So that's BITTECHTALK. So who is Blacks in Technology? What are we? What do we do? Blacks in Technology is a tech-focused community and media organization focused on increasing diversity in technology. Since we're always focused on forming new partnerships and opportunities to assist our members with their continued professional growth, we're always looking to partner with people. So if you want to partner with us, send us an email to partnerships@blacksintechnology.net. Any general inquiries that you may have, send an email to us at info@blacksintechnology.net. And if you are interested in sponsoring a podcast, you can send us an email to sponsorship@blacksintechnology.net. Speaking of sponsors, this episode of the Blacks in Technology Big Tech Talk podcast is sponsored by Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch is on a mission to help organizations get actionable insights from data, from stock quotes to Twitter streams, Apache logs to WordPress blogs. That rhymed. I wonder if they did that on purpose. So anyhow, Elasticsearch is the company changing the way you put data to work. Visit their website at www.elasticsearch.com to download their open source products and learn how they can help you make sense of your data. Thanks to Elasticsearch for sponsoring this episode. We definitely appreciate it. What other announcements? Blacks in Technology is proud to be a media and community partner for iUrban Teen and helping them promote their California Summit. The California Summit is going on January 31st at 2015. So you can check that out on the Blacks in Technology website. There is a blog post on it. So iUrban Teen is an awarding program promoting STEM plus art careers and opportunities in male youth of colors ages 13 through 18. Programs currently in the Portland metro area, Seattle and Kirkland, Washington, and now Los Angeles, California, and coming soon to Houston, Texas. So visit their website to learn more at www.iurbanteen.org, and they are looking for volunteers. So definitely go to the website. There is a link at the bottom for volunteer opportunities. They definitely need volunteers in the Los Angeles area. So if you're able to volunteer, click on that and get in contact with Dina Perrette. So iUrban Teen. And I think is that you, Sean, who just joined?
Yes, that's me.
All right, that's our co-host for this evening, Sean Jackson, a.k.a. GT50. I'm going to have to ask you about what GT. I don't think I've ever asked you what GT50 stands for. I'm guessing it has to do with cars since you're a car enthusiast.
Yeah, it's a long story. When I was my first tech support job at AT&T, when Hotmail was a new thing back in January of late 1996 or early 97, I signed up for a Hotmail account, and at the time I had a Mustang GT, so that's where it came from.
Ah, got you. Excellent. Okay, let's get to it. I want to introduce our guest this evening, Jordan Sissel. I'm happy to bring Jordan on, and this is why. So I'm kind of a big fan when it comes to people in the open source community and them creating things. It's kind of like when I first met Ethan Gostad, the gentleman who created Nagios. So I kind of have these like fan moments when I'm just like, oh man, this guy, he mentioned me on Twitter, or he replied to me on Twitter. So Jordan Sissel is the creator of Logstash. He is a sysadmin and programmer, and he is now with the Elasticsearch team, and he leads the Logstash efforts there. So I definitely want to welcome Jordan to the show. Jordan, how are you?
I'm good, man. Happy to be on here. Thanks for the very nice intro.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. It's funny because I'm trying to think on how I first got wind of you. I think I watched the Hangops episode, and then I started following you on Twitter, and I might have tweeted, I think, and then I started experimenting with the elk stack, and then I kind of tweeted, hey, I'm doing this, and I think you tweeted back, and I was like, oh crap, you tweeted me back, that's pretty cool, and I think it went on from there, and then I started bombarding you with questions and things like that. So welcome to the show, man. I'm glad to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
So our first and most common question that we usually ask our guests is, tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in technology.
So I guess my real first start in technology was like way long ago as a kid. I was privileged to have very early access to computers, and I think it was an Apple or Apple II or something like that, where you booted it up and you got a basic prompt or something. I didn't know that was it at the time, but I thought it was neat. You could type stuff and the computer would do things. Then as I got up into high school, I kind of got a renewed interest in it, where I started getting on IRC a lot, and there was one IRC client called MIRC or Merc, however you like to pronounce it, that had a script.
Yes.
Since I spent a whole lot of time on IRC, you would find other people had these like cool tricks they could do with their IRC clients, like make all kinds of cool colored things or whatever. And I thought that was neat, and then I got into that. I did that for probably 2 years in high school, and that was my real first experience with programming. As much as you could, some folks might say that's not programming. Whatever, you make it a computer do stuff.
Yeah.
I like that, and I thought I was like, what, I'm gonna go to college and go to study computer science, and it went from there, and it led me into I think when I was in college, I had this like selfish view of what I wanted to actually write programs for, and I didn't really see myself working at a company working on a piece of software that I had like little interest in. So I had picked up systems administration because, again, tinkering with computers was fun for me. And I got into that, but I still kept my interest in programming. And I found that when stuff's on fire at 3 a.m, it's greatly in my interest to resolve those fires as quickly as possible, because frankly I really like to sleep. And and who doesn't, right? And over time, I would figure out how to automate a lot of these things, whether that's through small scripts or full-blown programs, and ended up sort of writing code to solve a lot of my pain points. How I ended up writing tools like, or starting tools like Logstash and SPM, which are really just the scratch itches I had in the system, and where I was, Logstash, I was tired of logging into 20 or 30 or 100 servers trying to find out what the problems were. I just wanted to, just ask a small question and get a quick answer, instead of having to deal with, where are the logs, what are we doing with them, things like that.
Cool, and I love, and I've read your profile and some of your background information, and I love the way that you describe what you do when it comes to, writing scripts to automate things. What is it that you call? I think it's hate-driven development.
Yeah, it's hate-driven development. It's I forget who came up with the term, but it was to describe, I guess, a pattern I have with software, where I just get so infuriated with the way a piece of software or a computer's behaving that I just kind of grind on a problem for a while, and at the end of the grind, at the end of the tunnel, I have, it's kind of cathartic because it's like yelling in a way, where you're just releasing a lot of energy and de-stressing yourself. But at the end, sometimes there's a piece of software. Logstash was one of those. FPM was another. I think FPM is probably my most hateful-driven software because I was just tired of building packages. So frustrating. And now I don't have to anymore. That's cool. And we built the great thing, I think, about a lot of the open source stuff is that you can share it and actually build a community of folks around it and build friendships and have something more tangible than just a piece of software that people can download, but you actually have groups that can share information and share like, this was really useful for me, or this bug really ruined my day, and can we fix it? All kinds of cool stuff.
Nice. Tell us real quick what FPM is.
So FPM is a way to build software packages easily. By packages, I mean like native operating system package formats like RPM for Red Hat systems, for Debian, or I think that's Solaris support. Actually, the number of packages it supports these days has grown beyond my ability to remember it, which is awesome. But solving a big pain point where if you had no knowledge of how to produce a package, but you knew, for example, you were running Red Hat and you needed to build an RPM so you could deploy some internal project, you would Google for how to build an RPM, and you would be presented with, Red Hat's packaging guidelines, which are, 50 or 80 pages of text. And what you started with was like, I just want to put this piece of these files in a box and ship it all over production. Like, why am I reading like an 80-page manual now? And that was my first upsetting experience. And then I switched jobs, and instead of using Red Hat, we were using Ubuntu. So you had to repeat this process all over again with Debian. Debian has their own packaging guidelines, which are, probably twice as long. And they're for good reasons, right? They're good reasons these things are written. But it's a really frustrating experience for new users. And I wanted something simple. I wanted to say, like, take this Ruby library and make an RPM. And I wanted the command line or the interface for doing that to be extremely short. And so that's what ended up becoming FPM.
Cool. And where is that available? Where can we download that? Is that just out there on GitHub?
It's on GitHub. If you Google, let me see. I don't know if it's the first hit. FPM. If you search for FPM package, it's the first hit on Bing and Google. So that's the best place to go.
Cool.
And yes, it's like there's one thing I would say about the software that I try and build in the communities I try and help steward is that if the software is treating you badly and you're having a bad time, it's a bug. And if you spend 5 minutes and you can't build a package with FPM, it's a bug. Come ask the community. Come get help. File a ticket. Email me. Do whatever you have to do. Send me a tweet. Tell me you're having a bad time, and we'll get you on the right track.
Yes, definitely. And I can vouch. Yeah, I can definitely vouch for that. And I think that's a great philosophy because a lot of times, especially in the open source community, you come across, some of these open source software that's not really documented very well. And then, you're kind of fumbling around and Googling everything. And some people do it like this, and some other people that have different ways of doing it. And I like that philosophy that you say, if you can't figure this out, if your documentation is poor, that's a bug as well. It's not just the software that can be a bug, but there can be a bug in the documentation. So, and like you said, if you tweet Jordan, he'll answer. I've done it, and he's answered, pretty quickly.
Yeah. I will say that if you tweet something angry about Logstash, I'm going to come back to you on Twitter and say, hey, how can I help? Or what's making you upset? But,
well, if you say that now, I think everybody listening to the podcast will send you an angry tweet right now just to get your help.
And if I can't help, I'll try and point you in the right direction. But for me, open source is so much less about code and much more about communities and building things. The software, digital software, stuff in the digital age you can infinitely replicate it. That's exactly how piracy works, right? You can just make infinite copies of things for basically no cost. And so if open source were only just code, then there would be no love in it. And to build communities, you need a lot of love, and you need to understand that people are going to have bad times with computers. And, maybe they just need a hug. Maybe they just had a crap day. And you just need to say, you know what, that computer's being stupid. Maybe we can help.
Understandably.
Nice.
And I think that was one of my favorite things about Elk and Logstash when Greg introduced me to it inadvertently months back when I think he had started working on it. You did.
I just wanted to get that on the record.
Yeah, Greg. I was chatting with Greg on IRC, I believe, and he's like, "Oh, I'm trying this thing," and he sent me a page. I think he sent me to Kibana first because I think I was looking for, I'm constantly looking for some way to deal with dashboarding and things like that, and I've never found something that really worked the way I wanted it to. And he's like, "Oh, take a look at this," and so I took a look. I'm like, "Oh, that's kind of cool." And then he also told me about Logstash, and so I thought, And so at the time, I didn't really have a project. It was like I had a lot of things up in the air, and I'm in healthcare, so we had PAC systems and things going, and I'm just like, I don't have time right now. And so then, probably like 6 to 9 months later, once a lot of my projects fell off my plate, I decided to take a look at it, and it actually worked out fairly easily. I mean, I didn't have too many issues. I remember I had one minor problem, I think, under initial install, but I think it was resolved fairly quickly and went on from there. And it's been running for probably about, I think, 3 or 4 months now with not too many issues.
Nice. That makes me happy.
Yes. And sorry.
Go ahead.
I was about to touch on the other thing that he was speaking of with the being a system administrator. It reminded me of something that I was told a very long time ago by he'll probably be a very old system administrator now, if he's still working, that the best system administrators are inherently lazy, basically implying, they script themselves out of a job if they do it right. Find ways to make, the mundane things that happen every day, easier or automate themselves.
Yeah, I think it's true. I think you have to take the lazy word there to mean that they're inclined to sort of codify what normal manual activities they might be doing and write a script or write some kind of program or framework to allow them to do it more easily.
Yes, exactly. Well, yeah, he wasn't continuing. Okay.
Go ahead.
So, Jordan, what is your day? I mean, as the leader on the Logstash project, take us a little bit through what your day consists of.
So, joining Elasticsearch was a fairly significant transition for me in terms of 2 things. One, this is the first time I'd taken what essentially was a hobby, and I was fortunate enough to have spare time and things like that and spare interest to be able to build something like Logstash kind of in spare time and deploy it at work and see how it works. For me, kind of in that self-centered view of I want to work on software that benefits me and my team type of thing. But and then the second transition was moving from being kind of an individual contributor into being like a lead, a tech lead, or a manager of sorts. And the second thing I mentioned, which was the kind of being a leader or manager, is basically a lot of my day I spend with like severe imposter syndrome, where I feel like I'm far out of my element and I'm not doing a good job, or whatever reasons I tell myself I'm not doing well. But now we have I think almost 10 people now on the Logstash team, which is to me a phenomenal milestone in that this is something that's been we've been working on for a couple of years now. We built the community, and now we have folks that are able to not only deploy it at work, and that helps them with their livelihood, and we have people working here, which makes us deploy things faster. So my day-to-day is trying to steer the ship, as it were, in terms of what kinds of major features and directions we're going to be taking the project, and then when there's questions about older and darker portions of the code, I get to, we get in a dark room and have a chat about this one time I wrote some really bad code, and here's I'm going to tell you what I think it was supposed to do, but actually doesn't.
That sounds great. Well, I know some of this has already been discussed, but can you tell us more about specifically what Logstash is, why you created it, and how did it become part of the Elk stack?
So the original, so the Logstash project itself was started in around, I think, 2009. But the seed, I suppose, of what became Logstash was from 2004, I think, which you'll see is one of the filters in Logstash called Grok. And I wrote Grok because this is the first time I'd really gotten into Linux and Unix systems, and I looking around the system, and I saw like the security logs had all of these failed login attempts from bots. And I was learning about firewall rules and things like that, and I said, why don't we just automate blocking these things? If a failed login attempt that happens more than 5 times in a minute, block it. You'll see this formalized in open source projects like Fail to Ban, which is a pretty cool project. But I wanted to.
I actually just heard about that.
Yeah, it's good. It's good these days. You can not to get too far off topic, but I think Fail to Ban can do like clustering now, so you can have shared information across multiple machines. So if there's a brute force attempt that's spread across your infrastructure, it'll pick that up.
Yeah.
I may be false. I'm wrong about that, but I think I remember reading that. But one of the things, if you've ever done log analysis or like written a script to process a log, you'll probably reach for a tool set like regular expressions, where you kind of pull out pieces of text with some kind of a cryptic language to parse things. And then I didn't want to just do. Once I wrote something very simple for doing like brute force login attempts, I looked at like some web server logs and saw similar activities, but the log formats were completely different. So the recognition that there are thousands or millions of different and incompatible log formats is why Grok was written, 10 years ago now. And that fed into several years later, growing into not just the parsing problem of figuring out, what's the IP address that was related to this log request, or what was the error code, or how long did it take. But also, you have a kind of centralization problem where especially with cloud stuff these days, you can have more than 100 servers, or at least 100 virtual machines, or kinds of components in your infrastructure. And in order to debug a problem, you have to know where the logs are on each machine. You have to know what machines those logs are on. You have to have access to get to those machines. You have to have expertise to be able to read the logs. And all of those things together, it's a serious cognitive burden, right? Especially, again, I focus on things blowing up at 2 a.m. Like you have your mental faculties are not good at 2 in the morning when you've been woken up by a pager. And so I think one of the things that I like doing is sort of codifying my knowledge, and that's how FPM became the package builder thing. I got tired of writing RPMs by hand and just make something generated. So Logstash became this sort of general purpose log processing system. But in addition to just processing and parsing your logs, it helps you transport data. So you can run it on like 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 servers and collect all of your logs and parse them into a same structure, and then you can store them in a single place so that you can query them. And that's where Elasticsearch comes in. But
nice.
I think when I talk about Elasticsearch, I think Elasticsearch to me was really the catalyst that made me want to put a lot of effort into Logstash. Because if you look at what log analysis is, you have to transport all your data somewhere central so that you can read it in one place. You have to process it because none of the formats are the same. So that means you have to store it somewhere that's hopefully scalable. And then you want some kind of visualization system so that you can start looking at shapes instead of raw text. And when I found Elasticsearch, it solves the storage problem for me. It promised to be a horizontally scalable distributed search system, and that fits exactly what I want to do with logs. At the time, there was no visualization component, but it solved the hard problem to me, which I was not interested at all in solving, which is the data storage solution. So that was, I think, the catalyst for Logstash. So you put them together, and you have something that can centralize your logs, process them into a common format or common scheme. Then you can do searches and analysis on them. You can ask for all kinds of cool questions.
Excellent. Speaking of search, we got a question in from Twitter, from Ayori. So thanks, Ayori, for this question. I want to pose to you, Jordan. With Google as the 800-pound gorilla, what edge does open source search tech have for us?
So, by Google, I assume you mean like Google search, like the web search.
Yes.
I think that's correct. Feel free to tweet at it out and say I'm wrong. But the use cases that Elasticsearch is solving isn't just like web property search or document search in the normal sense. Elasticsearch gets used for a number of different, I would say, like problem spaces or business use cases. You could certainly use it to build something like a web-based search engine. You'd have to write the web crawler component or use an open source one. There's a lot of good options for you there. But beyond just straight up document search, there's data analysis. So instead of looking, what Google does, what the user does on Google or Bing or something like that is you're searching for some terms and it gives you web pages, right? Those are you're typing a term in and you're getting documents back. But Elasticsearch is more than just search. It gives you analytical features. You can ask for a given search query, what are the most popular words in all of your documents? Or if you're storing numerical data, you can ask for the standard deviation of a certain field in all of the documents that are found. Those types of things lend itself very well to what Logstash helps with, which is log processing. And so if you're taking, let's say, front-end application logs, and they may say, I sent a query to the database, and it took such amount of time. If you're storing that stuff in Elasticsearch, you can ask Elasticsearch to say, okay, over the last hour, show me the average and standard deviation of backend database requests. And then if there's a spike, you can start zooming around and figuring out what is the cause of that spike. It's really powerful. So it's more than just search. It's more into search and analysis. And if you're interested in the kinds of analysis Elasticsearch can do, we can talk about that. But Elasticsearch calls it aggregation, where you can do like a top terms or common phrases or statistical analysis or things like that. Very neat, very, very, very cool.
And Elasticsearch comes with a very robust API to assist in that, correct?
Absolutely. So one of the things I think Elasticsearch is really excelling at is that it's basically driven entirely by an API over HTTP. So where a lot of systems you would have to have, and Logstash is included, but in a lot of systems where I think it's not. Logstash made some mistakes early on. Whereas Elasticsearch, like the config file for Elasticsearch, most people don't touch. You leave all the defaults and you just run it. And anything else you do with Elasticsearch, any configuration you do with it, is after you start it up and after you've got a cluster. Whether that cluster is 1 node or 1,000 nodes doesn't matter. The instructions for what Elasticsearch should be configured to do happens while it's running. So everything is API driven, which is really, really awesome. And I wish I mentioned some regrets about Logstash. I wish I had made Logstash API driven from the start and not config file based.
Gotcha.
Okay. What languages do you currently write code in?
So I write code right now in mostly in Ruby. Logstash is written in Ruby. The reason for that was in 2009 or whatever when this project was started. That was just the language I used most commonly. Beyond any narrative I spin beyond that is mostly to make it sound cooler. But it was just the language I picked. That there was no other reason. But I think it was a good choice long term because Ruby seems to be almost kind of anecdotally, but it's friendly to people who don't consider themselves whatever you might label a real programmer. And doing scare quotes as I say real programmer, because I think that's a silly phrase. But we've gotten a lot of contributions from the community who people write new plugins for Logstash, and they write this cover letter, and they say, I'm sorry, I'm not a real programmer. I've never done Ruby, but here's a plugin that outputs to Nagios. And it works. That's awesome. I love. I'm not happy that they're deprecating themselves, but it's awesome that they found success. And so I think Ruby was a good choice. We deploy on JRuby as a platform. And JRuby is an implementation of the Ruby language, but it runs on Java, on the JVM. So you get things like good access to real threading primitives, so you can use multi-core systems. It has a really mature garbage collection. It gives us access to both the Ruby ecosystem of libraries as well as the Java ecosystem, which is awesome. Basically doubles the amount of libraries you can use. So that's Ruby. We also, Elasticsearch is programmed primarily in Java, but we also have a dedicated Elasticsearch clients team. We mentioned that Elasticsearch is basically all programmed through the HTTP interface. And so we have clients for, I think, at least in my opinion, most of the major programming languages. We have officially maintained clients that are well tested and things like that. So you may not have to learn the HTTP way of speaking to Elasticsearch. You can use the Perl client or the Ruby client or the Python client or whatever your language might be.
Nice.
I suppose Kibana is the last piece of the puzzle, which is programmed mostly in JavaScript. I think it's I can't remember the framework they use. I think it might be Angular, but I might be wrong about that.
Nice. What would you like to see in the future for Logstash?
So we're sort of planning out tentatively what the roadmap is going to look like for what we're loosely calling Logstash 2.0. And I look at the success of other projects, and we're trying to mirror those what we believe made them successful. One of which is Elasticsearch's ability to cluster and form something that sort of scales relatively naturally. It kind of throws your data around how in the right ways so that you can have 10 servers in a single cluster, and you can ask them all the same questions, and they spread the data around, or they farm out the work to answer your questions. I think one of the next steps for Logstash is going to be doing something similar, where instead of deploying one Logstash agent per node or per system that you want to deploy it on, you deploy a cluster of them. And maybe we figure out how to, in the long term, distribute work or automatically scale or do some kind of resiliency or load sharing or things like that. But I want the configuration interface for Logstash, I want it to be at the cluster level. I don't want it to be at a per node level. Because then we can start automating things, right? We can start talking to 100 Logstash boxes. It'll be much easier to reason about.
Okay. That sounds good.
That would be really nice.
Yeah.
What? During my implementation of Logstash and Elasticsearch, I come from a background where I've dealt with relational databases for 15 years, and have just about zero exposure to NoSQL style databases. The one thing I found interesting was when I set up Elasticsearch Logstash was that getting counters and things like that implemented, and some of the information I saw regarded using statsd and some other packages to get this type of thing set up. Do you have any tips on how someone would normally do this without, I guess, dealing with it, during the import and adding like a counter or something like that to the log itself?
Yeah, so I'll talk about statsd and then what we can do without statsd. So statsd, for folks who don't know, is it's kind of like just a service that does counting. You send it packets and you say increment this counter by such and such amount, and the output of this system is sort of an aggregated view. So the use case is you let's say you have web requests coming in. Every time you get one web request, you send like increment number of requests by 1 to stats-D. And every 10 seconds, it'll output the aggregate views, average number of requests per second, standard deviation, those types of things. And I think that's a good solution if you already have stuff like graphite or similar metrics-oriented systems. The world that I think Elasticsearch is trying to build is that Elasticsearch can be your metric store, it can be your document store, your log store. It's actually quite good at metrics. If you were going to do counter-style things in Elasticsearch, Elasticsearch has an API, I think they call it upsert or update. I think update is the right API call, where you say update a given document that's already in Elasticsearch, and you give it a script. You say update and update this field +1.
Okay. Okay, that sounds like it should work. Yeah, it was rather difficult. I actually had spoken to Greg about it when I ran into it because, coming from SQL, a lot of times, I could say something like, okay, just write a quick query, and just set up a, count based upon query. And, so when I was doing Elasticsearch, I'm like, okay, how do I make a metric out, just like on the fly, without having to really give a lot of, forethought and get this, built on the, when the data's coming in. So
yeah, that makes sense.
So
I think that's one of the ways I think these kind of schemaless style data storage solutions are useful, because in the logging in the world of logging, there's a billion formats. You don't really know the schema of your data. If you're looking at a relational database like MySQL, you have to declare all of your columns on your table before you start storing data in it. Whereas with things like Elasticsearch, you can define that up front if you want to. But you have options of allowing Elasticsearch to kind of discover what your data looks like and kind of build the schema on the fly. In terms of getting counters out of it, there's a bunch of different kinds of queries Elasticsearch can do. If you want to know, if you're using Logstash and you have web data coming in, you want to know the shape of data over time, like hits over the last hour, but for each data point, you might want them to be like over every minute, so you get a nice graph, like a nice line chart over an hour over time. Elasticsearch's aggregations API will allow you to do that. You can do a histogram over time, bucketed by some kind of time interval. Where I think that gets really cool is you don't have to know the questions you're going to ask before you ingest the data into Elasticsearch, which is where I think the logging use case is really valuable. If you don't know the angle at which you have to view the data to answer some questions before something catches on fire. Yeah.
Nice. So we've talked about some parts of the ELK ecosystem. We talked about Elasticsearch, which is the indexer and the search engine, Logstash. We talked about Kibana, which is the front end. But there are actually a couple of more pieces to this ecosystem. One is Marvel, and the other one is the security. I don't know how to explain it. It's not an appliance, but it's a security plugin. Is that accurate? Okay, so can you tell us about what Marvel is and tell us about the security plugin?
Yeah, sure. So Marvel is kind of a how to describe it? It's a monitoring dashboard on top of Elasticsearch. So Elasticsearch itself has a lot of internal statistics and metrics about how it's behaving, how much memory it's using, how long certain things are taking on disk, other background task behaviors, how frequently things are being merged, or whatever the general behavior of the system counters. And Marvel takes that data and building on Kibana's existing interface, it basically takes the statistics coming out of Elasticsearch and Kibana to do the rendering, and it gives you a really powerful view to see what is going on in your cluster for the purposes of debugging it. So if your queries are taking too long, or data appears to be missing, or one or two nodes appear to be slower than the others, you can use Marvel to see the shape of data across your infrastructure, across your Elasticsearch nodes, which is really, really great for debugging it.
Excellent, excellent.
And for
And
Shield is still in beta. I don't know exactly when the release is coming, but it's adding a number of security features to Elasticsearch. It's going to be adding role-based access. It's adding SSL support, so you can encrypt your traffic within the Elasticsearch cluster as well as coming in. I think it may have a few more features, but my brain is forgetting them.
No problem. That's great information. So I use I haven't gotten Marvel to work yet, but I've in the past when I first started using Elasticsearch, I used the plug-in head to keep an eye on the health of my Elasticsearch cluster. And it helped me in the beginning to kind of visualize the concept of shards and indexes. But when I read about them initially, the concept kind of eluded me. And then I actually see that question quite a bit whenever I get out there and I'm doing a search or something like that, looking up a problem about Elasticsearch or something like that. I'll see somebody, say, hey, what's the difference? So just tell our listeners, kind of explain to our audience what shards and what indexes are, how they operate in Elasticsearch. All right.
So actually, this was the question I had spent the most time preparing today, and hopefully I have a good answer. I will give you a caveat and say that I'm most familiar explaining these things when I have visual aids, but we'll continue.
Okay.
Over audio, but we'll do the best I can, and if I'm confused, let me know. So at the most general level, an index in Elasticsearch is just a collection of documents. A rough analogy to the relational database world is a table. The MySQL table is roughly analogous to an index in Elasticsearch. And so an index is just a body of data. A document in Elasticsearch terms would be a row in a SQL database, for example. Not to stretch the relational database metaphor too far, but so you have an index, and it's basically all your documents. You can have multiple indexes, for example. Logstash will do one index per day, and I'll talk about why we do that after I finish explaining indexes and shards. But you can have one index, 10 indexes, 100 indexes. It's really up to you and what your data needs are. But let's say you have one index, and it's a collection of a bunch of logs for today. The way that Elasticsearch scales out horizontally is it splits up your index into a bunch of partitions that they call shards. And each shard can be different sizes, but it's a fixed number of shards. But by default, you have 5 shards per index. You can change it if you want to. And a shard is essentially the distributed unit of work in Elasticsearch. So if you have 5 Elasticsearch servers and using the default, your one index will be spread roughly evenly. I mean, statistically, it's going to be about even across all 5 servers. Now, in some cases, some shards may be placed on multiple servers if you have replicas. So replication is another feature of Elasticsearch where each shard can be replicated. The default is that you have one replica, which means you have 2 copies for redundancy and also for performance. Hopefully I explained that well. Does that make sense? Indexes and shards?
Yeah.
The shards are just parts of your index. An index is just a body of documents.
Yeah, definitely. And I just wanted you to explain that because, like I said, I'm and maybe you're like this too, but I'm a visual person. So when I read something, it might not quite click at me at that moment. But when I installed the plug-in head, and then I looked at it, I'm like, oh, okay, now that really makes a lot more sense in how the indexes, how I have one index per day, and then these shards are broken up in between each one of the nodes in the cluster, and it made more sense.
Yeah, it's so much easier to just point at a visual and say, yeah, that's a shard and that's your index.
Exactly.
The metaphor.
One day, Greg and I had a.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, one day, Greg and I think it must have been about a month ago, we had an in-depth conversation about these indexes and shards because come from the relational side, it was like index, and I was like, okay, yeah, index, but I didn't realize index in terms of Elasticsearch actually stored documents also, and so it was quite interesting.
Loaded term, yeah.
Yes. So how does a person?
Go ahead.
Sorry.
You can finish up.
No, go ahead. I was done.
Okay. I was about to ask, okay, so how does a person who wants to try out the elk stack get started?
Lots of good resources. So our website, elasticsearch.org, has download links to all of our software. If you're looking specifically to use elk itself, the way we package Logstash is we have it include Elasticsearch and Kibana in the same package. So if you're just looking for a small demo or small proof of concept, all you need to do is download the Logstash package, and I believe the Getting Started guide on the Logstash website will show you how to use each of the things.
Nice. So one of the things that I've run into when setting up the elk stack is kind of right-sizing the elk environment. I guess I should say more of the Elasticsearch cluster. I'm sending about, I don't know, right now I'm sending about between 25 to 30 gigs of data a day to our Elasticsearch cluster. And that's without, somebody jump off? I'm still here. Hello? I think we lost Jordan. Well, we'll be right back with that question. If you're listening there right now, we are talking the elk stack. That's Elasticsearch, Logstash, and Kibana with Jordan Sissel. Jordan dropped off the call. I'm pretty sure he'll be right back on. We were in the middle of asking him a question about the elk stack. But a lot of great information going on right now about search, about Elasticsearch, about the entire elk stack. So I'm really stoked to be asking George, to have Jordan on the show to be asking these questions, getting a lot of good information here. So Jordan just hit me up on Twitter. He said, "Oops, phone broke, rebooting." So he'll be back on shortly, and then we'll continue with the podcast. Ayuri, she's saying that this is such a fun, nerdy talk. Love it. She loves nerds. Thank you, Ayuri. Like you, though. Everybody's talking nerdy tonight, man. This is nerd talk night or something. Hey, don't get too geeky here.
My phone is awful. Sorry about that.
That's all right. We were just talking about Ayuri. Ayuri just tweeted that she's loving this podcast. She likes the fun, nerdy talk. So just getting a laugh out of that. So as I was saying before, right-sizing the elk environment, more specifically Elasticsearch. I send about 25 to 30 gigs of data a day to Elasticsearch. And this is without, paring down any of the information that I send it. A lot of this stuff was set up to kind of get a feel for what we could do with Elasticsearch and everything. So it was pretty much, turn the water hose on and just let Logstash suck it all in and let Elasticsearch do all the indexing. But I did run into some performance issues and didn't really find a lot of information out there on the internet about how you would go about, or maybe I just didn't understand it, about right-sizing your elk environment. So can you give us, is there anything out there, or can you give us some tips about how do you kind of right-size your environment, around some best practices, I guess, around Elasticsearch configuration, like the allocation of resources, the number of nodes per cluster, that type of thing?
Sure. So I suppose the first thing I would say is the capacity planning question. Our first response is always, when I say our, I mean our as a company. Our first response is always to say, it depends. And then you get a frustrated sigh from whoever's asking you, like, no, I just wanted, give me a formula, give me a number, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so let's take your 20 to 30 gigs a day thing, for example. Specifically for Elasticsearch, if you're seeing performance problems there. Let me do some math real quick, because math is awesome.
Okay.
20, I'll say 30 gigs a day. 30.
I'll talk to your little, the paper rolling here in a second.
Hey. It's valuable for this stuff. But,
Fiverr is even better. I got to double my abacus. Hold on.
I'm just letting you guys know that we are blowing up the geek meter. It's like way over in the red right now. We're talking 5 rules and abacuses.
Hey man, you got to use the tools you need to get by. That's all I'm saying. All right, so with your 30 gigs a day, my hand wave estimate is that it's about 2,000 events per second, 2,000 log messages per second. Does that sound about right?
Yes.
And so with that respect, I think a single, moderately sized Elasticsearch node would be able to handle that. Now, when I say moderately sized, I'm normal, an M, on EC2 and X large. I think it's got 4 8 cores and 16 to 32 gigs of RAM. Like a medium-sized system, even though Amazon calls it a extra large. But we're not here to argue semantics, I suppose. But I mean, the place I see most people having trouble with Elasticsearch not being given enough resources is in where did my train of thought go on that one? Is at search time. So if you're having trouble, if Elasticsearch seems relatively healthy when you're storing data in it with Logstash or whatever your indexing method is, but when you send a query to it, it falls over or it freezes or it takes a couple of seconds to get a response. Usually that means that for the data set that you have, it's too big to fit easily in the memory to do some calculations on. So the number one trouble is that if your query is going over such a large amount of data that Elasticsearch can't compute the answer fully in memory, then you're going to have to spend a lot of time pulling things into memory, putting some other stuff back onto disk, back and forth. And so I think where you might run into trouble as new users is Elasticsearch's the script that you run to start Elasticsearch has a default Java memory size of 1 gig, which is perfect for prototypes and things that are not going to be hit very hard. But you want to give more memory than that, probably, depending on your use case. Now, for your 30 gigs a day times, 30 days, that's quite a bit of data if you want to ask a question of something that happened over the past month. And so Elasticsearch has to go and pull all that stuff into memory and then do some computation. So it may be that you want to give it more memory. And in terms of memory recommendations, we recommend giving half of your system's available physical RAM to Elasticsearch. And there's a reason for half. The reason for half is that is 2 reasons. One is Elasticsearch will store everything on disk in a compressed format. And that has benefits because most modern operating systems have this thing called a file system cache, where if you read something off of disk, the system kernel will acknowledge that thing was read and store the value in memory so that if you read it again very shortly in the future, it doesn't actually have to hit disk. It comes right out of RAM. And so by only giving Elasticsearch half of the physical memory, you give the other half of the physical memory to the file system cache or other things that are using the memory system. And just by having things compressed, if you have 16 gigs in your file system cache, that's probably going to be 20 to 30 gigs of actually uncompressed data, which is really easy to access. The second reason we recommend only giving half is because the JVM or Java garbage collection gets slower as you give it more and more memory. So we recommend if you have a really, really large server with more than 64 gigs of memory, don't give Elasticsearch more than 30 gigs of RAM. And that'll help keep Elasticsearch able to keep things fresh in memory. It'll use the file system cache intelligently. And you also get, if you're doing a lot of things that cause garbage collection in Elasticsearch, it'll still be fast.
Okay. That makes sense. And early on in setting this up, there were some things that I definitely had to set. The heap size was definitely one of them. And there was a couple of hard limit, a couple of things I think in the Elasticsearch config itself. It was the lock off so it wouldn't swap.
Yep.
I did set that as well. And right now I have a 3-node cluster. I think each of them have about 16 gigs of memory apiece. And it's noticeably a lot faster doing queries and things like that. But at first it was really locking up quite a bit, and I had to kind of search to and fro to try to come up with some answers on what to try to fix. So.
I think you're right on track in terms of identifying that the capacity planning for Elasticsearch is it's not well documented at all. Even if we can make the claim that it's a difficult science to do, like we should have some documentation that helps users get started. One other story I would tell you is about in terms of scaling is the configuration file for Elasticsearch. Our recommendation is don't touch it. Leave it alone. If it looks like a knob, but like you can tune the dial, like number of thread workers or sizes of things, don't touch them. The first interaction don't touch them. He was keeping that with me.
It's hard to demonstrate not to touch something.
Just don't touch that knob, that button, that big red button that says it's going to blow things up. Don't touch it. But Elasticsearch will tune itself to your environment, which is cool. So that's why we recommend not touching things.
Yeah, as I told Greg previously, I think probably a month ago or so, I had a minor issue with my virtual machine that's running Elk, and it resolved. Eventually, it took several hours. Eventually, when I resolved it, it was an issue to deal with the amount of memory that was set because it was initially set to 1 gig, and it was very strange because every time I start up Elasticsearch, the process will run, but it would just seem to lock up. There's like no log files, nothing's going on. And then eventually after I don't recall, I'd have to probably search through IRC logs or something. I finally figured out that there was an issue basically JVM, and so I increased the JVM to 2 gigs, and that took care of the problem. I believe it was Marvel that actually helped me figure out what was going on because initially it was funny because initially I'd only had Marvel running for like a week or two, and it was like over a weekend I come back to work and I log into Kibana and it's just nothing, it's dead. And so, I initially thought Marvel had killed it for some reason. And so I thought, okay, let me try uninstalling Marvel. Did that reboot, it's still dead. And so eventually when I got Marvel reinstalled, I started looking at it, it was showing information on JVM, and basically it's just at 100%, it was just stuck there. And so that's when I went through and tried doubling it to 2 gigs, and then from that point it's been running since. But yeah, I think there was very little documentation on that also when I was looking for it, or for the easiest time.
Yeah, in some cases we need the software to give us more feedback when it's having trouble. But in some cases, when the JVM is just out of memory, it spends all of its time trying to clean up resources. It's just all it's doing is garbage collection. So even if Elasticsearch wanted to detect that, they couldn't.
Exactly.
Yeah. On the config file thing, my story for that is always that if operations people, myself included, are the worst at just like randomly tuning things that look like knobs. And I think that keep turning things until it works, right?
Exactly. I can make it better.
Yeah, exactly, right? It goes to 11. We might as well take it to 11. But if our cars or in our bikes and our houses and everything had all these knobs that software had, our cars would all burst into flames, the bikes would collapse, and our houses would fall.
Let's own a Ferrari.
yeah, right. Right, like, car engine timing, very sensitive things. If you just like have a knob that you just turn to like change the timing, like your engine's going to collapse on itself or whatever actually happens when that changes. And that's why that's probably not a knob in most people's cars. So the practice for Elasticsearch, and I think they do a good job at this, is anything that could be a constant in your environment. Elasticsearch makes something that's tunable, and it tries to pick a reasonable default. And in some rare cases, we'll say, change it, but leave it alone. Just don't touch it.
Gotcha. Good information to know. Because I'm definitely always looking in there and poking around and saying, oh, hold on, what happens if I know the default is this. Let me uncomment.
5 charge is good, 25 is better.
Exactly. I'll just double this and see what happens. I do that all the time.
It's sort of like when you have like EQ settings, and then you like turn all your EQs down, and then you like then you start raising the values of each one of them just to get things right. I wish it worked like that, right?
I know, right?
So what's next for the elk stack?
So it's lots of cool stuff. Kibana 4 is in public beta right now, so y'all can check it out if you want. And Kibana 4 is a pretty significant change, and a massive improvement, in my opinion, of what Kibana 3 provided. Kibana 3 was all about dashboards, and you'd have your unit of viewing stuff would be a dashboard with different panels, where a panel is just a visualization, a graph, a pie chart, a table of some kind. And Kibana is moving away from that a little bit and making the main unit of work the panels themselves. So you can build one special view on a certain kind of data and then reuse that in multiple dashboards, which is going to be really awesome. And it also adds support for Elasticsearch's aggregation system. So you can do multi-dimensional analysis. You can look at across 4 servers, and across your servers is one dimension, and then the applications running on them, and then the disks underneath them. So you get really good operational intelligence for IT data. It's going to be so awesome.
Nice. And what can you mention? Just tell us a little bit about is this the first user conference for Elasticsearch, ElasticON?
Yeah, ElasticON is going to be happening in March of next year, and it is the first user conference. It's in San Francisco, I think March 9th. It's going to be I'm really excited about it. I don't know how many details we've released about it, but you can go to elasticon.com and get some more information about it. But we're going to be talking about, we're going to have the keynotes are going to talk about future paths, the road to where we've been. We're going to have really, really technical deep dives about certain kinds of topics, whether that's Logstash or Elasticsearch or Kibana, or use cases about various different things, whether that's IT log data or stock streams, or one of the coolest demos I saw recently is Seattle's City of Seattle, I think. They have a live stream of all of their 911 calls, and one of our folks here has that set into Logstash and has that map plotted on a map in Kibana, so they can see in real time for specific kinds of 911 calls. They can track that across the city in real time, which is so cool.
Oh wow! Nice. Great. So ElasticCon, I said ElasticON, and it didn't even recognize it. It should have just been con. So ElasticCon going on. Let me see. You say March. You say 9th through 11th? Yep.
Yeah, I think it's 9th to 11th.
2015. Yep. San Francisco, California. So what's next for you? What do you got going on in your life?
Yeah, I got going. I got 2 kids. Kids are awesome and frustrating in equal ways, but kids are so good. So that's most of my time these days outside of work is raising the kids and hanging out with the family and whatnot, and pretending I can actually do housework, like I don't know, running speaker wire or something in the walls, but and then swearing a lot. It seems to be my forte. I destroyed my garage, almost destroyed my garage door a couple of days ago, but thankfully it was a cheap fix. I had professionals come out and undo my mistakes. So that gets back to the don't do knob thing. But
it's funny. I try to tell my wife that she always wants to, be Mrs. DIY, and I'm just like, it's all good and dandy when you're following instructions, but what happens when things go wrong? That's when you need experts there to clean up your mess. So I'm like, I like to actually stay away from those type of projects, DIY projects. And so I didn't notice in your picture that you had any missing teeth, so I'm kind of having a hard time to believe that you play hockey.
So our league, I play what everyone calls beer league hockey, which is you're not actually allowed to have beer in the locker rooms or anything. So I don't know why they call it beer league, but I play. I think in my area there's probably 15 leagues ranked from like A to E, and for some reason they went A, B, 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 C, double C, triple C. I don't know. The counting system doesn't make sense to me. But we play in triple E, which is like the third from the bottom in terms of skill level. So we're not your Gretzky's, and as a result, we have to wear face shields, and so no one loses teeth. But
so no throwing off the mask onto the ice and just going at it, huh?
I mean some of us got to work in the morning, I'm
like, those are professionals.
Hey, I was at a fight once and a hockey game broke out. What are you?
Yeah, what are you gonna do, man? Sometimes that act is slippery. Sometimes it upsets you.
Exactly.
It's fun though, man.
Nice. And so, you'll be speaking at ElasticCon. You spoke at PuppetConf. Any other conferences coming up that you're going to be speaking at that you know of?
That I know of. I don't know. I'm just surviving day to day, trying to keep stuff going. But my time management has gone out the window lately. I think it's trying to take care of 2 kids. But so I talked at PuppetConf. I talked at FaucetCon. FaucetCon was a great conference. Really awesome thing.
Yeah, he's a bit member, Brian Smith. So yeah, big up to Brian.
Yeah, nice. That was a great conference. And I'll be speaking at ElasticCon, and I think I'm going to be at Strata in San Jose early next year, I think in February, and I'm also going to be at Scale in Los Angeles. Scale is also an excellent conference. They have it's very hacker friendly, Linux focused, but they have a kids track. And when I was walking to my talk last year, the conference room across the hall was this like 12-year-old kid teaching a bunch of adults how to make dice in Blender. And Blender being a 3D rendering software. And I was just like, wow, this is amazing.
Nice. I actually took my sons to the Ohio Linux Fest this year. It was the first TechCon. They're 5 and 2, and I've got pictures of them playing with the one laptop per child. So that was pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the big O'Reilly conferences are always monumental. So
yeah.
Well, how can people get in contact with you, get in touch with you if they want to follow you on Twitter or email you or?
I will confess I'm terrible at email. So if you email me and I don't respond, you'll have to post me on Twitter. But on Twitter, I'm just at Jordan Sissel. And my email, if you want to email me, is my initials JLF at semicomplete.com. But Twitter's the easiest way to get in touch with me. It's if you have questions about Logstash and you don't know who to talk to, feel free to email me directly. I'm not gonna make fun of you. All questions are good questions. If I'm not available, I might point you at a community that could help you, whether that's Logstash or some other community if I know it exists. But reach out if you have questions or you want to chat about stuff.
Excellent. And there's IRC rooms for each one of the the main components of the Elk Stack: Elasticsearch, Kibana, and Logstash, correct? On Freenode?
Yeah, not Kibana though. So Kibana, at least as far as I know. Yeah, there's just Logstash and Elasticsearch.
Actually, no.
Is there?
No, yeah, there's a Kibana. I'm in Kibana room right now. As a matter of fact.
I'm in there now too. I didn't know there was one, but now I know.
So, okay, cool. So, is that it? Yeah, oh, no. I wanted to give the URLs for downloading the Elk Stack. You can go to elasticsearch.com, correct?
Yep, that's right.
Excellent. Well, Jordan, I want to thank you for joining us this evening, giving us some great insight on the Elk Stack and making sense of your data. Feel free to, hit us up anytime, and maybe we'll have you on later on this year sometime. This was a great podcast, and I definitely appreciate it.
Yeah, this is awesome. I think my one closing thing would be that if you try out Logstash or the Elk Stack or whatever, or SPM if you need to package stuff, and you run into trouble, don't bang your head on it for a couple hours. Show up in the community, ask the question, recognize that software universally is bad, and that, as humans we can come together and hug it out and realize that we can help each other. So if you're having trouble, it's a bug.
Excellent. Well, thanks again, Jordan, and wish you well on anything you do in the future, and hope to see you or hear from you soon.
All right. Thanks, Craig and Sean.
Take care.
Take it easy.
All right, that is it for this episode of the Blacks in Technology Big Tech Talk podcast. I want to thank all of our listeners. Thanks to our guest, Jordan Sissel. Thanks to our sponsor, Elasticsearch. And thanks to Sean. Sean, you still on?
Yes, I'm still here.
Hey, thanks a lot, man. Definitely appreciate you coming on and partaking in this delightful podcast, very delightful and informative podcast. So come check us out. We're at blacksintechnology.net, a.k.a. Sean Jackson. Thanks again, a.k.a. GT50. He's in our IRC channel, and that's Bit Tech Chat if you want to come in there and chat with us. So thanks to all our supporters throughout the years, and especially this year. Been some great things coming up for the upcoming year. We want to wish everyone a great holiday season and a happy and safe New Year. So thank you for listening. I hope this podcast has educated some of you on the Elk Stack and on visualizing your data, making sense of it. If you have any ideas or topics for a future Bit Tech Talk podcast, shoot them to us. Just shoot us an email to contact us at blacksintechnology.net. Check yourself before you wreck yourself. I love that phrase. I made that up, by the way. Take care, everybody, and see you next year. Take care, Sean.
You too. Talk to you later, Greg.
Blacks in Technology.
Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology. Blacks in Technology.